I think Alain Robert free soloed harder grades than I ever have.
He's free soloed some of the tallest skyscrapers in the world. He's been arrested over 100 times. He's free soloed some of the hardest rock routes in the world. He's had accidents so bad he's been declared 65% disabled and told he'd never climb again. This is a story of Alain Robert. Alain Robert is nicknamed the real-life Spider-Man for his insane free solos of some of the world's hardest and tallest buildings across the globe. A statement that is easy to dismiss, especially in this day and age of YouTube channels claiming they've climbed some crazy skyscraper, only to click on the video and it's 2 hours GoPro footage of some lad in a balaclava going up a skyscraper's steps, with the only bit of climbing being the ladder at the top, and then finish with some really uncomfortable looking one arm hanging at the top for a sick insta-pic. Though, maybe I'm just being gatekeepy, but it does annoy me when people claim this is climbing. So it's fair to say, whenever I hear people climbing buildings, I don't pay that much attention. I presume it's a bit of a gimmick. Even when I first heard of Alain and the fact that he was a climber, I thought, cool, probably just some insane punter. Though I might be right about the insane part, punter would be far from the right word to use for him. Alain Robert was born a climber. Well, at least he started climbing at 8, which in the grand scheme of things isn't too far off. But his first few years of climbing, he stuck to the normal stuff, just rock. He does talk about in his movie and book of being locked out of his home in his teens and having to scale 8 floors to an open window and how he felt like Robin Hood. Which I think for anyone else would be a bit mad. But for Alain it was a small event in his life compared to what he had yet to do. And so years before his fame, arrests and soloing buildings like these, he was actually a serious good rock climber. And I don't mean like local gym wad good, I mean like good. Like one of the best free soloers of his time and regarded by Honnold himself as one of the first people to push free soloing.
Well, I think Alain Robert was one of the first people to really free solo very difficult routes. I mean, really, I think that what he's done on rock is much closer to the cutting edge. The most relevant part of the grades that Alain was soloing in the 80s is just how close to the limit of human potential they were at the time.
Alain was free soloing 513D when 514 was the hardest sport grade being climbed. Nobody is doing that now. To be pushing free soloing right to the line of what at the time was considered possible. So what I'm trying to get across is that Alain wasn't just some lad who had dabbled in rock before spending a career on buildings. He has had a fucking amazing rock climbing career. But with all ups and lifes comes downs, and unfortunately when it comes to climbing, unplanned downs tend to be quite quick and dangerous. Alain has suffered some life-changing injuries through his falls. He talks about them in detail in several interviews, including London Real, where he talks about falls that have led to him being in a coma for 5 days, pronosupination, fractured nose, fractured heels, fractured wrists, fractured pelvis, head injuries that have led to lifelong vertigo and seizures, and even being declared 66% disabled. Doctors didn't even think Alain should be able to walk. But instead of succumbing to the injuries, Alain would switch directions and begin doing things that no one had ever dreamed of. What I do find funny in this story is how Alain came to start climbing buildings. It wasn't an active passion or reliving his childhood story of breaking into his house. It was a sponsor asking Alain to climb a building in Chicago. At first told it was going to be with a rope and permissions from the local council, which slowly turned to them asking him to free solo a building and get arrested. Luckily, they picked their climber well, and it led to Alain free soloing his first ever building and having his first of many encounters with the police. And so the French Spider-Man was born. Now, when writing this video, I scoured the internet to try and find as many buildings that Alain had climbed to make sure I didn't miss any, and plan to name them all here. But I've realised he's a busy boy, over 100 skyscrapers, and I need to keep this video under 2 hours to keep my boss happy. Please subscribe. So I thought it's best to just look at a few, but from a climbing perspective. Because what I find so impressive about Alain is the fact that even after such an amazing rock climbing career and mad injuries, that he hasn't just gone and searched for the tallest jug ladder buildings out there that look impressive to the public but just is a leisurely stroll for him. His passion for hard climbing really shines through when you take a closer look at the lines he actually climbs on buildings. one of which is the Sears Tower in Chicago, an ascent that definitely boosted his fame and reputation for building climbing. It's a building half a kilometre in height with completely vertical walls, broken by splitter cracks running the full length of it. After travelling there to check the building out, Alain realised it was a next level ascent and had to put off Solwing it to go back to France and train for it. But this is Alain Robert training for a climb, so he didn't just go back to hang board or make replica moves on his training board. Alain found a building that was built very similarly close to his home in France. There he got permission from the building's owners and started soloing laps on the cracks, getting the technique down and building endurance for what was going to be properly make your hands sweat while watching free solo. But before we get into the ascent, let me tell you about our sponsor Element. When you're having long days in hot gyms or sunny crags, sweating buckets is unavoidable. When you sweat, the primary electrolyte lost is sodium, and when that's not replaced, it will not only lead to you flailing and falling on your project, but can also lead to muscle cramps and fatigue. So a better way to refuel your body than Element Recharge Electrolyte Drink. Free from sugar and artificial colours or ingredients, Element will help boost your body's performance and recovery to keep you sending longer. And good news, they're giving everyone from the community a free gift with any purchase. All you have to do is order from the link in the description of this video and you'll receive a sample pack which includes one packet of every flavour. You'd be mad not to. Now, usually crack climbing involves the dark arts of jamming, a technique in climbing that involves shoving your limbs into cracks and twisting and contorting your body until it feels stuck. Something that without practice feels impossible, but Honnold himself says crack climbing can be some of the most comfortable climbing to free solo due to the fact that when mastered, every jam feels like a secure jug. But when we go back onto Alain's building crack, or more like anti-crack, because it looks like a crack, but climbing on it was a completely different story to what you'd find on rock. First of all, it's made of metal. One thing about metal is there's not a lot of friction to be had, something climbing heavily relies on. And the crack wasn't solid on either side, instead it had an opening on the inside. This meant that although it was just above finger size, so maybe he could have snuck a ring lock jam in, I'm pretty sure locking on such thin metal frames would result in Tommy Caldwell looking hand. So the building was never going to be easy to climb, never mind free solo.
J'avais jamais encore grimpé de gratte-ciel de 450 mètres de hauteur et je me disais je dois pas avoir la résistance suffisante pour faire un truc comme ça. À l'époque c'était nouveau, une verticale absolue de presque un demi-kilomètre de hauteur. J'avais jamais ressenti un vide aussi impressionnant.
The technique of climbing this building involved wrapping his fingers inside holding the inside of the crack, which looked like a finger jug, and jamming his toes into the crack below. A jam I'm pretty sure is fucking sore for Alain. And so the fact he was able to go and do that for half a kilometre on the Sears Tower is a bit mad to put it lightly. I mean, I struggle to have long sessions on the fake indoor cracks built for comfort, never mind what he had to do. Especially when you consider there's no real resting on this type of climbing. The nature of the holds, along with the fact it's metal and there's no friction, means I'm pretty sure you have to keep pretty high tension at all times to stop you taking quite a long slide to the bottom. Looking at the footage, you can see he got to different sections where it looked as though rest was possible, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still quite impressive. Another of Alain's technically hard climbs was the Bank of Slovakia. Though Alain claims it to be one of his hardest free solos, it lacks some of the big publicity of his other big climbs, due to the fact it's only 15 stories. Though 15 stories is plenty high enough, and not a height I'd ever attempt, it lacks its mainstream catch. Such as when he climbed the world's highest building, the Burj Khalifa. Even though Alain has said on Instagram he doesn't actually properly count this climb due to the fact he did use a rope throughout the climb, it still appealed to the mainstream news more. Though I'm not trying to take away from this ascent at all. It's 830 metres of climbing that was so hard Alain didn't free solo it. So I think that's quite telling of how difficult it must have been. I mean, even Honnold had this to say about it.
And those little chrome fins that stick out. And then you see right above them is that little tiny metal lip. The technique for climbing the Burj is like, you hold the two beams, you move twice, you catch the down pulling little metal lip right above them, and then you do 3 moves on the little lip, and then back to pinching the chrome beams. I thought it was like V4-ish. But the thing is, it's 112 floors until you get a break. So you do the same V4 boulder problem 112 times in a row. It's incredibly pumpy. It makes you very, very fatigued.
Now, back to the Bank of Slovakia. This climb, again, was mental. And metal. A different type of building to the Sears, instead of cracks running up it, it had metal beams protruding out the whole way up, with beams going horizontally also. I'm sure you've all seen this type of skyscraper. It makes rectangles that goes all the way up. The size of these rectangles and how big the beams are determines the difficulty of the climbs. If you get small rectangles with nice sized beams, then the climb is just like a really tall ladder. For the Slovakian bank, they were not small, but quite large. The beams that ran up the building were just far enough apart that Alain was able to reach to. But the beams going horizontally were not quite close enough together to comfortably reach from one to another. And the climbing between the horizontal ones were not easy. It involved Alain pinching the beams on either side of him whilst bridging his feet on the inside of the beams and shuffling up. A movement that feels okay when done on two fez and a lovely Clymnos crag with nice frictioned rock, nicely spaced bowls. Not such nice movements when it comes to smooth, shiny metal beams. It creates very taxing climbing that really doesn't leave much room for error. 15 stories will very quickly start feeling like the Burj Khalifa when you're doing these moves that high. These skyscrapers are obviously technically difficult, but the actual climbing isn't the only difficulty he has to deal with on his ascents. I think most madmen will be scared off climbing these towers by the sheer difficulty of the climbing, and if not that, then at least the fact that it's usually highly probable that they'll end the ascent in a cell. But Alain doesn't see it as an extra reason why not to climb them. In fact, Alain has said in his film Legend of Spider-Man that he finds it good when a building is too easy technically, then the whole police trying to arrest you adds a nice bit of spice to what might have been a slow day out for him. His run-in with the police have resulted in over 100 arrests, 30 plus days in cells, $10,000 in fines, 4 convictions, and even being banned from climbing in places like the UK, USA and Hong Kong. Some of them being eased, some not. And through these difficulties, what's inspiring is that Alain pushes on. And not just in a selfish pursuit for himself, though I'm pretty sure he absolutely does love it and would never stop, but in many of his climbs he brings in a protest aspect of matters that have deep meanings and beliefs behind them. Such as climbing the New York Times building in the US for climate change and trying to use his passion for good. Though I know there's another side of people disagreeing with the way in which he protests due to the dangers that comes with it, and maybe not even agreeing with what he protests. I think that the fact that Alain Rubert uses world-class climbing and free soloing ability to not only push the world of free soloing and climb some mad buildings, but to try and push messages that he believes in to make the world a better place is pretty cool. You should definitely watch this next video, I bet you'll love it.